The world has just thrown us all a huge curveball and thrust us into a new reality. And whether or not that personal reality for you has led to a ton more time or a lot less time to get to your creative passion, there's no doubt been a huge change in your creative output. Today we're going to talk about both situations and how you can best utilize this time and also get into a positive mindset so that your creativity and your life doesn't suffer. That's coming up. What's going on, everybody? I am Youngman Brown, and this is Your Creative Push, the podcast and the YouTube channel that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. And in today's video, I want to talk about two of the situations that you might be finding yourself in. Most of us are finding ourselves in one of these two categories with the coronavirus pandemic going on, with the world changing around us. Scenario one is you have a ton of extra time now. You have, for whatever reason, whether you're furloughed from your job like I am, or whatever other situation might be happening, you've found yourself with a ton of extra time and you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to get to all of the creative passions that you've been trying to get to, getting ahead on your work, fill in the blank. I've talked about it already, and it's a good situation to be in on paper, but mentally it could start to drive you crazy, and I'm going to touch on that. And the second scenario where you might find yourself in is that you don't have any time. You actually have much, much less time because either your kids are home or you have to work from home and figure out this new world that you're in, and you find yourself having no time to get to your creative passion, but everybody else in the world seems to be able to get to their creative passions. I'm on the YouTube channel encouraging you to get to your creative passions, but you can't find the time. So we're going to touch on both of those scenarios and how you can best navigate that situation to get into a good headspace. Now, as you're going to see in this video, comparison is going to be a common theme. So I want you to think about that as I share my story as honestly and openly as I can. When I was furloughed from my job, pretty much immediately, and I have a deep tendency to do this when bad news happens or when something negative happens, I come up with the lists and try to put a positive spin on what happened. So for me, I'm kind of fired from my job temporarily. I'm like, all right, I'm going to utilize all these next weeks or months or however long it is to really get to my creative passion, really get ahead on the podcast. I'm going to do 20 podcast episodes. I'm going to do 50 YouTube videos. I'm going to clean the basement. I'm going to finish the soundproofing for my podcasting studio. I'm going to redesign my office. I'm going to play with the dogs for 20 minutes a day. I'm going to read 50 pages a day. I come up with all these goals, and goals are great, but sometimes we have a tendency to overestimate our ability or our time or our just energy to get to all of these things all at once. And as we talk about on the podcast all the time, when we have consistent days of doing work all hours of the day, we get burnt out. And sometimes that burnout happens much quicker than we'd like. And the other thing about setting all those goals is now you have set a super high bar, or I set a super high bar for myself that before I even started on this sort of extra time that I had, I'd already kind of made it really hard for myself to be satisfied. And I was really stressed out the first few days. Even though I was getting work done, I was editing the podcast, I was recording videos, I was doing all these goals that I set for myself. I wasn't doing them fast enough for my liking. And I'd go to bed super stressed out. My wife would ask me, like, what's the matter? Like, you got so much done today. I was like, yeah, but the amount of time that I had literally all day. You know how long I've been wanting to have an entire day to get to my creative passions, and it still wasn't enough. So I was comparing myself to this ideal that I had when I had this burst of energy from being furloughed. And it really set me into a negative space. Even though I was getting stuff done, I wasn't getting enough stuff done. So maybe you can relate to that. Even though it's a ton of time, are you working yourself too hard? It's a really serious issue and something that I had to learn to get over. And I did actually learn to get over that. And then I took it a little bit too far the other way, where I was just relaxing all day, just chilling out, not worrying about anything. Then I finally found that balance of getting a bit of work done, relaxing, getting some more work done, and really focusing on my emotions. And what I felt like doing and doing what I felt like doing. Because when you do work, when you're not feeling like doing work and really pushing yourself too hard to be in the chair, even though it's really important to sit in the chair and get work done, that can really lead to not just burnout, but kind of mental anguish, especially when you don't know what's going on in the world. And I read a very interesting article yesterday about people that are suffering from depression and anxiety and how some of them are actually finding relief and solace in the coronavirus pandemic and the situation that we all find ourselves in, as backwards as that may seem. But that was actually something that I could relate to, and I instantly clicked on the article to read it. And the article goes on to interview some psychologists that, when polled, they say that about 20% of their patients have actually found relief in this situation. 20% have found that this situation has definitely exacerbated their symptoms and made things much worse, which is very understandable. And the other 60% have found no change at all. And I'll link that article below if you want to check it out. But the reason I bring it up is because it had a profound effect on me in thinking about this unprecedented time that we are living in currently and how we all deal with it in different ways and how that's very, very okay. It's okay for this situation to affect you differently than it affects your neighbor, than your best friend, than your wife even. It's okay to deal with the situation the way that you need to deal with it. And for me, it's a different thing day to day. Sometimes I'm good. Sometimes I'm creating a ton of work and everything's easy peasy. And then other days it's hard. And I think you have to be kind to yourself if you do find yourself with a ton of time, not comparing yourself to how you were yesterday, not comparing yourself to how your wife is, how your best friend is, how people on Instagram are, or even worse, how you planned to be when this whole thing started. Because back then you had no idea how you would internalize it. So be super kind to yourself. That's always my advice, but be super kind to yourself if you have a ton of time and you are finding that some days are easier and some days are harder, not just with getting to your art, but just with dealing with the situation. Be super kind to yourself. And in talking with so many of you on the Facebook group and on the YouTube comments, I realized that I've been neglecting the second category of people, the people that have found themselves with no time because of what life has thrown at them. Perhaps there's more people at home that you either have to take care of or navigate. Perhaps you have a job, a new job, or an old job that you now have to figure out how to do at home. A myriad of life stuff has been thrown at you, and you have found that art has taken a back seat and is on the back burner, and you can't get to it. Yet, you go on Instagram, or you go on Facebook or Twitter or wherever it is that you check out other people's creative output, and you see the amount of work that they're putting out, and you're envious. You wish that you were able to put out that amount of work. And the fact that you're not at that point because of all the stuff you have going on in your life, you feel like a less of an artist because you can't put that out. And I just want to remind you that it is okay to have a life that requires life stuff before you get to your creative passion. It's okay to put your creative passions on the back burner. And it's really detrimental to compare yourself to other people. Just like it's detrimental to compare your art style or your writing style or your music style to another person's, because you'll never match that style exactly. And you don't want to match that style. In the same way, you're not going to be able to match that person's life. You don't know how few responsibilities or how many responsibilities that person has. You don't know how they're dealing internally with the situation that life has thrown at us. Perhaps the only way they can get through it is through their art or putting out a lot of art. You can't compare yourself to that person. And in one activity maybe that you could do to help yourself is to actually do the math. Actually figure out how much time it would take you to match that person's output. How many hours would it take you to do a watercolor a day, for example? Figure out those hours, and then on the same list or on the same piece of paper, write down all the responsibilities and all the things that are happening in your daily life that are holding you back from doing that thing of a watercolor a day that you're envious of. And then realize the things that you have to cross off on that list, whether it's homeschooling your kids or doing your job to make money to provide for your family, or taking care of your mother or father, or all of the stuff that happens in life, and realize that you actually would have to cross off all of those things, and probably be even more upset that you neglected those responsibilities than, getting a jump start in your art career or your creative process. In the same way that it was unhealthy for me to compare my output to that super high bar that I set for myself, it's unhealthy for you to compare yourself to other people and their amount of output. So maybe as a suggestion, during this time of uncertainty, when you're not able to get to your passion and you know that you're not able to, turn off Instagram, turn off YouTube, turn off wherever it is that you find that inspiration, and not necessarily on a daily basis compare yourself to other people, but you find that community. Maybe shut yourself off to that community, as weird as that is for me to say, so that you're not feeling that envy. You can get back to it when life returns to normal, or when you find a break and get back to it. But in the meantime, maybe it's better for you to not tune in, so that you're not mentally tuning out and mentally feeling that anguish for not getting to the things that you love to get to. And my final words of advice would be to just meditate. And not necessarily sit there and close your eyes and meditate, but just meditate back on your day. Think about what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and ask yourself, are you being too hard on yourself for not getting to that super high bar maybe that you set for yourself, or that you're setting for yourself because of the fact that other people are able to get to that point. My wife sent me this great tweet that's going around, and it reads, "You are not working from home. You're at home during a crisis, trying to work." And I think that definitely applies to creative people that are at home, finding themselves with either a ton more time or a ton less time. We are in unprecedented times. We are in a scenario that none of us have been at before. We probably never will be again. It's okay to be kind to yourself and to give yourself that time to sort of take in this whole experience and realize that it is a crisis. It's a crisis that the entire world is going through. Be kind to yourself and find that balance that is going to be yours and yours alone. And when you're ready, create, because the universe deserves your creations and you are the universe. I love you all. Hang in there. Be kind to yourself. Find that balance, and we'll see you next time. Bye.